Police cars in my driveway. Officers demanding ID. At my own house. I'm standing there with keys in hand, watching two cops treat me like a criminal on my own property. Through the window, my daughter Sophia stares out with wide, terrified eyes, the same look she had during her mom's final days in the hospital. The woman who called this in? Patty Whitmore stands across the street with arms folded, wearing that satisfied smirk like she just won some twisted victory. 2 years after cancer stole my wife, I'd moved us here hoping for safety and healing. Good schools, quiet streets, a place where a grieving teenager could maybe trust the world again. Instead, we landed in the crosshairs of a vindictive neighbor hell-bent on destroying what little peace we'd found. But Patty had no idea that in exactly 3 weeks, she'd be the one in handcuffs while news cameras captured her public downfall. Officer Martinez's boots crunched on gravel as he approached, looking genuinely embarrassed about the whole mess. What would you do if someone weaponized police against your grieving family? Drop your location. This revenge gets absolutely perfect. Let me back up and show you exactly how we landed in this nightmare. My name's Marcus Thompson, and 6 months before this police incident, I thought I was making the smartest decision of my life. After my wife Sarah lost her brutal 2-year battle with breast cancer, I knew my 16-year-old daughter Sophia needed the kind of stability she could actually count on. We'd been living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment across town, close to the hospital during Sarah's endless rounds of treatment. Every corner of that place held memories of sleepless nights, medical equipment humming in the background, and the gradual fading of hope that we'd pretended not to notice. The sharp smell of antiseptic seemed permanently embedded in those apartment walls, a constant reminder of everything we'd lost. When Sarah's life insurance finally came through after months of paperwork battles, I made a decision that felt like the first smart move I'd made since her diagnosis. I bought us a complete fresh start in Willowbrook Estates, a neighborhood that looked like something straight out of a suburban magazine. Manicured lawns stretched like green carpets, tree-lined streets created perfect canopies of shade, and it was the kind of place where kids still rode bikes without parents having panic attacks about safety. Most importantly for Sophia's future, Willowbrook meant access to Ridgemont High School, where 90% of graduates went on to 4-year colleges. Our new house still carried that sharp, clean scent of fresh paint when we moved in during late spring, with boxes stacked in every room like cardboard monuments to our hope for better days. Sophia had immediately claimed the upstairs bedroom with the best acoustics for her piano practice. Music had become her primary therapy after losing her mom, and hearing those gentle Chopin melodies drift through the house again felt like our first real sign that maybe, just maybe, we could heal in this place. But Willowbrook Estates came with something I'd significantly underestimated when I signed those mortgage papers, a homeowners association. And more specifically, it came with Patricia Patty Whitmore. Picture a 58-year-old recently divorced woman with way too much time on her hands and an apparent obsession with measuring tape precision. Patty had somehow appointed herself as the neighborhood's unofficial enforcement division, always lurking behind Venetian blinds, taking photographs of minor infractions like she was building federal cases against suburban criminals. She practically lived in the community clubhouse, this modest beige building that sat at our neighborhood entrance like some kind of suburban surveillance headquarters. From our very first day, I could feel her scrutiny on us like an actual physical weight. When our moving truck arrived on that Saturday morning, she materialized out of nowhere with an official-looking clipboard, immediately launching into lectures about proper moving procedures and weekend noise ordinances. The cloying scent of her over-applied floral perfume lingered in our driveway long after she'd finished her unwelcome orientation speech. When I parked my perfectly clean work truck, a Ford F-150 with my construction company's logo, in my own driveway, she'd patrol past our house twice daily, each time pausing to stare like she was memorizing license plate numbers for some invisible database of neighborhood threats. The experience of being constantly watched creates this persistent prickly sensation between your shoulder blades. You start second-guessing completely normal activities. Is my music too loud for 2 p.m.? Am I walking to the mailbox incorrectly? Does my truck somehow violate mysterious aesthetic standards? Sophia noticed the surveillance too. Her fingers would drum nervously on the piano keys whenever she spotted Patty's silhouette through our front window, which happened pretty much every day around 3 p.m. when school let out. But I figured every neighborhood has its overzealous busybody, right? Keep your head down, follow whatever rules exist, and eventually you'll find peaceful coexistence. I'm a construction engineer, for crying out loud. I respect proper procedures, clear documentation, and reasonable guidelines. How difficult could it possibly be to manage one slightly overzealous HOA secretary? As it turns out, significantly harder than convincing teenagers to voluntarily clean their bedrooms. The police incident should have been the end of it. Officer Martinez was genuinely professional about the whole embarrassing mess, clearly mortified that his time had been wasted on what was obviously a malicious false report. He even apologized before leaving, muttering something about overzealous neighborhood watch programs and promising to document the caller's questionable judgment in his incident report. I figured Patty had learned her lesson about crying wolf to actual law enforcement officials. Boy, was I spectacularly wrong about that assumption. 2 days later, I discovered a bright orange violation notice tucked under my windshield wiper, like some kind of municipal parking ticket from administrative hell. The header screamed, "Willowbrook Estates HOA, official violation notice," in bold, threatening letters that looked official enough to fool most unsuspecting homeowners. According to this impressive-looking document, I owed exactly $200 for improper vehicle placement resulting in boundary encroachment and community aesthetic standards violation. The specific accusation made my engineering brain physically hurt. My work truck allegedly extended approximately 2 inches beyond the acceptable parking boundary of my own driveway. 2 measly inches. I'm not making this up. Standing there in the crisp morning sunlight, reading this bureaucratic nonsense for the 3rd time, I caught that now familiar scent cocktail. Diesel fuel from my cooling truck engine mixed with Patty's overpowering rose perfume that seemed to linger like criminal evidence wherever she'd conducted her official inspections. The woman had actually trespassed onto my private property with measuring tape and a digital camera, photographing my vehicle from multiple angles, like she was documenting a federal crime scene for some suburban FBI investigation. 20 years in construction work had taught me something absolutely crucial about people who throw around precise measurements to justify financial penalties. You better have your own numbers ready to fight back with professional documentation. I remembered reading about property boundary disputes during our lengthy home buying process. Something about easement laws and fundamental homeowner rights to professional verification before paying any HOA citations. Smart homeowners always demand official surveys before writing checks for questionable violations, especially when the measurements seem suspiciously convenient. So that's exactly what I did without hesitation. I called the HOA's management company directly and formally requested a licensed boundary survey for my specific property. 3 business days later, a legitimate surveyor showed up with professional equipment, took actual precise measurements using industry-standard tools, and delivered his certified findings. The results were absolutely beautiful. My truck sat perfectly legal, positioned 18 full inches inside my property line. Patty's 2-inch violation was off by 20 inches in completely the wrong direction. But when I marched into the HOA management office with this professional survey, the clerk's reaction told me everything I needed to know. She stared at the official paperwork with genuine confusion, then checked her computer system twice before looking up with bewildered eyes. "Sir, we don't show any recent violation reports filed for your address, and according to our administrative records, Patricia Whitmore doesn't have authority to issue parking citations." That moment hit me like a steel beam falling off a construction site. Patty had been manufacturing completely fake parking tickets with absolutely zero official backing or legal authority. I started having casual conversations with neighbors during weekend encounters, casually mentioning my interesting parking experience without seeming like I was investigating anything specific. Within 1 week, 3 different residents had quietly approached me with nearly identical stories of suspicious citations and questionable fees. Mrs. Mila from Maple Street had actually paid $150 for a mailbox positioning violation that existed nowhere in official HOA documentation or community guidelines. Jim Rodriguez right next door had been successfully scammed for unapproved lawn ornaments, specifically targeting a decorative garden gnome that had occupied the exact same flower bed location for 5 consecutive years without any previous complaints or concerns. David Kim down the block had reluctantly forked over $300 for unauthorized satellite dish installation on equipment that had been professionally installed with all proper permits and written HOA approval just 6 months earlier. He'd kept all his paperwork but paid anyway to avoid confrontation. The fraudulent pattern became crystal clear as I spread these neighbor stories across my dining room table that evening, creating a detailed timeline of systematic deception. Patty wasn't just harassing my grieving family with targeted intimidation. She was operating a sophisticated neighborhood extortion racket, counting on busy, stressed homeowners being too intimidated or overwhelmed to verify her completely fake authority. The rich aroma of fresh coffee mixed with the gentle sound of Sophia's evening piano practice as I organized this mounting evidence into a comprehensive timeline of violations. My daughter watched my careful detective work with curious eyes, unknowingly learning valuable lessons about standing up to bullies who hide behind official-looking clipboards and fabricated documentation. "Dad, why would someone pretend to be in charge when they're not actually in charge?" she asked between delicate musical phrases. "Sometimes people who feel completely powerless in their own lives try to control others instead, kiddo, but that doesn't make it right or legal." Her beautiful music filled our house like a quiet rebellion against Patty's systematic attempts to silence our family's happiness and peace. But something deep in my gut told me our self-appointed neighborhood dictator was just warming up her escalating harassment campaign. Unfortunately, that instinctive feeling proved absolutely correct. If fake parking tickets were Patty's opening move in this twisted neighborhood chess game, her next escalation was pure psychological warfare aimed directly at our healing process. She went after the one thing that had brought genuine joy back into our house after Sarah's death: Sophia's music. It started on a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon. Sophia had just bounced through the front door from school, backpack abandoned by the entrance like teenagers do, and was settling into her sacred daily routine. 3 to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, just like we'd established when we moved in. She'd been working on Debussy's Clair de Lune for weeks, and honestly, listening to those gentle, flowing notes drift through our house was like emotional medicine for both our grieving hearts. 20 minutes into her practice session, there came a sharp, authoritative knock at our front door. The kind of aggressive knock that puts your nervous system on high alert, like trouble announcing itself with brass knuckles wrapped in fake politeness. Patty stood on my porch wielding yet another official-looking clipboard, this one filled with what appeared to be legitimate noise complaint forms, complete with professional timestamps and decibel readings. Her expression carried that particular smugness of someone who believes they've just delivered a devastating checkmate move. "Mr. Thompson, excessive noise disturbances are absolutely not tolerated in this community," she announced without any greeting, completely ignoring Sophia, who had stopped playing and was now watching nervously from the staircase with those wide, uncertain eyes that reminded me too much of her hospital vigils. "Noise disturbances? It's 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, and it's a piano, not a construction site. Community quiet enjoyment policies clearly state that musical instruments cannot exceed established ambient noise levels during residential hours." She thrust a copy of some official-looking document at me, complete with professional letterhead and intimidating legal language designed to make normal people submit without questioning anything. I scanned this supposed policy, my engineering brain hunting for inconsistencies. "This says musical practice is prohibited between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. It's literally the middle of the afternoon. First official warning logged." Her pen scratched against the clipboard like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Subsequent violations will result in progressive financial penalties and potential board review." Over the following week, Patty documented 12 separate excessive noise violations from our house. 12 individual incidents. She was apparently camping in that clubhouse with a stopwatch and decibel meter app, creating an elaborate paper trail of my daughter's piano practice like she was building a federal case against suburban musical expression. Here's where 20 years of construction site noise regulations became incredibly useful. I'd dealt with municipal sound ordinances countless times, and I knew the legal framework inside out. Residential noise laws specifically protect reasonable daytime use, and HOAs cannot override municipal quiet enjoyment rights without documenting actual violations of measurable sound limits that exceed established community standards. So I bought my own professional decibel meter for $39 and started systematically documenting neighborhood noise levels. Sophia's piano at full volume registered 68 decibels from our property line. Patty's nightly television blasting crime dramas from the clubhouse? A solid 74 decibels with windows open, clearly audible 3 houses away. But here's what really caught my attention. Patty's complaint timestamps showed violations during her supposed HOA work meetings. Yet every time I glanced toward the clubhouse during these alleged professional hours, there she was, lurking behind Venetian blinds like some suburban surveillance operative conducting constant reconnaissance missions. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Patty wasn't just obsessive about noise regulations, she was systematically lying about her schedule, whereabouts, and actual authority within the HOA structure. I also started noticing other interesting details. The clubhouse lights stayed on unusually late every night. Sometimes I'd see her silhouette moving around inside at midnight, like someone going about normal evening routines rather than just conducting meetings. The smell of microwave dinners often drifted from that direction during my evening walks with our dog. When Sophia quietly asked why the mean lady seemed to hate her music so much, I explained that sometimes unhappy people try to control others because they feel powerless in their own lives. But kiddo, your mom would have loved hearing you play Debussy this beautifully. Never let anyone steal that joy from you. That night, as Chopin's gentle melodies filled our house while vanilla candles flickered on the piano and the lingering aroma of our spaghetti dinner created the kind of peaceful domesticity Sarah would have treasured, I realized something crucial. Patty had made a fatal, tactical error. She deliberately targeted my daughter's emotional healing process, and that was a line you absolutely don't cross with a protective father who's already buried his wife. The sound of Sophia's music floating through every room felt like a quiet rebellion against Patty's attempts to control our happiness. But I had a growing suspicion that our neighborhood enforcer's obsession with monitoring everyone else's activities was hiding something much bigger than simple busybody tendencies. Time for some strategic escalation of my own. Patty's third move was her boldest yet, and turned out to be her most spectacular tactical blunder. She decided to call an emergency HOA meeting to publicly destroy my reputation in front of the entire neighborhood. The notice appeared on every door Wednesday morning like an official government summons. Emergency community meeting, Thursday 7 p.m., Willowbrook Clubhouse, pattern of community disruption and non-compliance, mandatory attendance for all residents. The tone screamed authority, the timing felt suspiciously convenient, and the whole thing reeked of manufactured drama. I figured I'd better show up and face whatever elaborate public execution Patty had orchestrated. Thursday evening, I walked into the clubhouse expecting a packed room of concerned neighbors ready to hear about my supposed crimes against suburban peace. Instead, I found exactly 4 people in a space designed for 50. Patty positioned at the head like a corporate CEO, confused Mrs. Rodriguez from next door, half asleep Mr. Peterson, and myself. The clubhouse reeked of that distinctive institutional combination: musty old carpet, artificial pine air freshener, and the lingering smell of whatever sad microwave dinner Patty had eaten earlier. She'd arranged multiple folders across a folding table like courtroom evidence, clearly expecting to preside over my neighborhood trial. "Thank you for attending tonight's emergency session," she announced theatrically, her voice echoing in the nearly empty space. "We're addressing ongoing violations that threaten our community's peaceful enjoyment and property values." She opened the first folder with dramatic flair and began reading my supposed rap sheet. Improper parking violations, excessive noise complaints, failure to maintain aesthetic standards, and something called aggressive behavior toward community officials. Apparently my crime of questioning her fake authority. Mrs. Rodriguez looked bewildered by the theatrical production. Mr. Peterson was fighting sleep. I was taking notes while trying not to laugh at the complete absurdity. "Mrs. Whitmore," I interrupted during her dramatic recitation, "who specifically authorized this emergency meeting? Because I've read our HOA bylaws, and emergency meetings require board president approval plus 72 hours notice to residents." The cheap folding chairs creaked as Patty's confident expression flickered like a bad TV signal. "As secretary, I have administrative authority to—" "Actually, you don't." I pulled out my folder of governing documents. Section 4.3 explicitly states only the board president can call emergency meetings, and only for safety issues or financial emergencies. Parking complaints don't qualify. Mr. Peterson suddenly perked up. "Speaking of which, where's Bob Mila? He chairs all our meetings." "Exactly," Mrs. Rodriguez chimed in. "Where is Bob? Why isn't this on the regular agenda?" Patty shuffled papers nervously. "Mr. Mila was unavailable due to scheduling conflicts." "Unavailable how?" I pressed. "Did you actually contact him?" Before she could answer, the clubhouse door opened and Bob Mila walked in, looking genuinely confused. "Sorry I'm late. Mrs. Rodriguez texted about an emergency meeting. What's the emergency?" The silence was golden. You could hear fluorescent lights humming, distant sprinklers, and Patty's authority crumbling like stale cookies. Bob surveyed the nearly empty room and Patty's elaborate setup. "Patty, I have no record of authorizing this meeting. What happened that I should know about? The third mini twist hit like a wrecking ball. Patty had been operating with zero official authority, not overzealous community spirit, complete fabrication of power and procedures. Seems like there's confusion about proper protocols, I said calmly. Maybe we should handle legitimate concerns through official channels? Bob was already packing up, embarrassed. Patty, we need to discuss meeting procedures. Mr. Thompson, I apologize for this confusion. Real HOA business goes through monthly meetings with proper notice. As we filed out into the cool evening air, I noticed something particularly telling. Personal items scattered throughout the clubhouse. A coffee mug on the counter, reading glasses on a side chair, personal mail stacked near the entrance, a throw blanket draped over one of the folding chairs like someone had been sleeping there. The place felt lived in, not just used for occasional meetings. Walking home under streetlights, pieces started clicking together. Patty's increasingly desperate behavior wasn't about neighborhood control or enforcement. Something much bigger was driving her actions, something that explained why she always seemed to be at that clubhouse, monitoring everyone so obsessively, creating fake authority where none existed. I noticed other details during my evening walks that week. The clubhouse lights stayed on unusually late every night. Sometimes I'd see her silhouette moving around inside at midnight, going through what looked like normal evening routines rather than conducting any kind of official business. The smell of microwave dinners often drifted from that direction when I walked our neighbor's dog. There were delivery trucks stopping at the clubhouse regularly, grocery deliveries, Amazon packages, even what looked like prescription medications being dropped off, all addressed to Patty personally, not to any HOA office or community organization. When I mentioned these observations to Sophia over dinner, she had an interesting perspective. Dad, remember when we lived in that tiny apartment after Mom got sick? How we tried to make it feel like a real home even though we knew it was temporary. That comment hit me harder than I expected. I had a growing suspicion that our self-appointed neighborhood dictator was hiding secrets that made my parking violations look like jaywalking tickets, and I was about to discover just how desperately right I was. Sometimes the biggest revelations come from the smallest observations. In my case, it was chronic insomnia and a leaky kitchen faucet that changed everything. It was 3 a.m. on a Saturday, and I was finally fed up with the rhythmic dripping that had been driving me crazy for weeks. The steady ping of water hitting steel echoed through our quiet house, motivating me to grab my toolbox and fix the problem. From our kitchen window, I had a clear view across the community park to the clubhouse. That's when I saw them. Full interior lights blazing at 3 a.m., not security lighting or exit signs. Complete interior lighting, like someone was wide awake going about normal nighttime routines. I paused with my wrench, watching for movement. Sure enough, a familiar silhouette moved around inside, conducting what appeared to be ordinary domestic activities. The next night, same thing. Lights on, movement inside, residential patterns when no legitimate HOA business could be happening. By the third night, my curiosity was engaged. I started paying attention during evening walks, noting deliveries, lighting schedules, and activity around the clubhouse. What I discovered was shocking. Patty wasn't just spending time at the clubhouse during business hours, she was living there full-time. Grocery trucks regularly stopped there with personal orders. Amazon packages arrived daily, all addressed to Patricia Whitmore at the clubhouse. I witnessed prescription deliveries from the pharmacy, personal mail accumulated by the entrance, utility bills and credit card statements mixed with HOA correspondence. But the real evidence came from public records research. County property records revealed something devastating. Patty's official residence had been foreclosed 6 weeks earlier due to unpaid mortgage obligations. Her divorce proceedings showed she'd lost the house in settlement, but had 60 days to find alternative housing. Those 60 days expired 3 weeks ago, exactly when her harassment campaign against us intensified. While Patty played neighborhood enforcer, writing fake citations and holding unauthorized meetings about other people's supposed violations, she was violating the most fundamental rule, illegally squatting in community property. But financial investigation revealed something worse than unauthorized residency. As HOA secretary, Patty had access to community maintenance accounts. Cross-referencing her financial struggles with recent HOA expenditures showed a disturbing pattern. Small amounts, 50 here, 100 there, had been systematically transferred from landscaping budgets to cover personal expenses, grocery bills, utilities, car payments disguised as maintenance costs, and administrative fees. She wasn't just living illegally in the clubhouse. She was stealing from every homeowner in our neighborhood. The irony was staggering. While obsessively documenting everyone else's minor infractions, measuring grass heights and timing piano sessions, she'd been committing actual crimes, embezzlement and illegal occupancy that could result in felony charges. I sat in my kitchen Friday morning surrounded by printed records and documentation, feeling vindication mixed with genuine sympathy. The woman who'd made our lives miserable, called police on my grieving family, tried silencing my daughter's healing music, was herself desperate, having lost everything and clinging to manufactured power and control. But understanding her motivation didn't excuse the damage or ongoing crimes against our community. Morning sunlight streamed through our window as Sophia practiced scales upstairs, gentle piano notes floating through our house like a reminder of everything Patty had tried stealing from us. Fresh coffee scent mixed with lingering pancake aromas, creating peaceful domesticity Sarah would have treasured. I had a choice. Quietly document everything and present it to the real board, letting official channels handle her crimes. Or be more strategic about how this information surfaced, ensuring her public downfall matched the humiliation she'd attempted inflicting on my family. After everything she'd put us through, after targeting my daughter's recovery and trying to destroy our sense of home and safety, I decided Patty deserved experiencing full consequences in the most public way possible. Time to plan the perfect trap. With concrete evidence of Patty's crimes burning holes in my filing cabinet, I knew I had one shot to expose her properly. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting every family in our neighborhood from ongoing theft and harassment. But I needed to be smart about it. My engineering background had taught me that the best traps are the ones people walk into willingly. Patty's greatest weakness was her desperate need to maintain the illusion of authority and control. So I decided to give her exactly what she craved. A public platform where she could display her supposed power right before I pulled the rug out from under her completely. The first step was documenting everything with bulletproof evidence. I invested in a discreet security camera system for the common areas around the clubhouse. Since these were community spaces, recording was perfectly legal. Homeowners have rights to monitor shared property for security purposes. I positioned cameras to capture the clubhouse entrance, parking area, and main windows, all angles where Patty's residential activities would be clearly visible. For the next 2 weeks, I collected footage of her daily routines, leaving the clubhouse every morning like she was heading to work, returning with groceries in the evening, lights staying on late into the night, delivery drivers dropping off personal packages. The cameras captured her hauling laundry baskets, setting up what looked like a makeshift bedroom area, even hanging personal decorations in the windows. Simultaneously, I gathered financial documentation through legitimate channels. HOA expenditure records are available to all homeowners upon request, so I formally requested 3 years of financial statements and expense reports. Cross-referencing these with Patty's known financial troubles painted a clear picture of systematic theft disguised as maintenance costs. The genius of small-scale embezzlement is that individual transactions look harmless. $50 for landscaping supplies here, $75 for facility maintenance there. But when you add them up over months and cross-reference with actual vendor receipts, the pattern becomes undeniable. Patty had stolen nearly $4,000 from our community over 6 months. I also quietly reached out to other residents who'd received her fake violations, building a network of neighbors who'd been victimized by her scams. Mrs. Mila, Jim Rodriguez, David Kim, and 3 other families had collectively paid over $800 in fraudulent fines. Each had kept their violation notices, creating additional evidence of her unauthorized enforcement activities. The next phase required setting up the perfect public forum. I contacted Bob Mila, our legitimate board president, and requested that a special agenda item be added to the next monthly HOA meeting. Community financial review and security updates. Bob agreed, thinking it was routine administrative business. I also suggested inviting Officer Martinez to attend as a community liaison, ostensibly to discuss neighborhood watch programs and security awareness. Bob thought it was excellent community engagement and extended the invitation. For the technical presentation, I prepared everything like a construction project proposal: clear documentation, visual evidence, and step-by-step timeline. I created a PowerPoint presentation that would walk through Patty's activities chronologically. The fake violations, unauthorized meetings, financial discrepancies, and illegal residency, building to an unavoidable conclusion. The beauty of this approach was psychological. Patty would attend the meeting expecting routine HOA business, probably planning to inject her own agenda items and maintain her facade of authority. She'd be sitting in the very room where she'd been conducting her illegal activities, surrounded by the neighbors she'd been stealing from, with a police officer present to witness everything. During this planning phase, I also prepared legal backup documentation. I researched embezzlement statutes, trespassing laws, and HOA governance violations, ensuring every accusation was supported by specific legal frameworks. If this was going public, it needed to be airtight. I even practiced the presentation timing. The evidence needed to be revealed systematically, allowing each revelation to build pressure before dropping the next bombshell. Too fast, and people wouldn't process the implications. Too slow, and Patty might realize what was happening and attempt damage control. The final element was community notification. I discreetly encouraged neighbors to attend the meeting, mentioning that important financial matters would be discussed. Word spread naturally through the neighborhood network. People were curious about their HOA finances, especially after months of Patty's aggressive enforcement activities. Sophia watched me prepare during evening hours, helping organize documents and asking thoughtful questions about justice and accountability. "Dad, will this help other families who got fake tickets?" "That's exactly the point, kiddo. Sometimes you have to stand up for everyone, not just yourself." As the meeting date approached, I felt that familiar pre-construction tension. Everything planned, materials ready, team briefed, just waiting for the moment to begin execution. Patty had spent months trying to control and humiliate our family through manufactured authority and fake violations. In exactly 1 week, she was going to discover what real accountability looked like, delivered in front of everyone she'd tried to intimidate. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for her to walk into it. With the trap meticulously planned and evidence gathered, all I had to do was wait for the meeting. But Patty wasn't done escalating her reign of terror. In fact, discovering my security cameras seemed to trigger her most desperate and dangerous phase yet. It started on a Tuesday morning when I noticed her standing at the clubhouse windows with binoculars, studying my camera positions like she was conducting military reconnaissance. By that afternoon, I caught her on security footage attempting to disable the cameras by spraying them with what appeared to be black spray paint. The problem with Patty's vandalism attempt was that she clearly didn't understand how modern security systems work. The cameras were motion-activated with cloud backup, so I had crystal clear footage of her face as she committed property destruction in broad daylight. She was literally creating more evidence against herself while trying to destroy existing evidence. But her desperation escalated beyond simple vandalism. 2 days later, I came home from work to find Sophia visibly shaken at the kitchen table, homework untouched. "Dad, that woman came to our door today," she said quietly, her fingers drumming nervously on her textbooks. "She said she was worried about my home environment and asked if I felt safe living with you." My blood turned to ice. Patty had crossed the ultimate line. She was now targeting my daughter directly, trying to manufacture child welfare concerns as leverage in whatever twisted game she thought she was playing. She kept asking weird questions about whether you ever got angry, whether I had enough food, whether I felt scared when you came home late from work. I told her you're the best dad ever, but she kept writing stuff down like my answers meant something different. The calculating cruelty of this approach was breathtaking. Patty knew that any child services investigation, even a completely baseless one, would create weeks of stress and scrutiny for our family. She was weaponizing the system designed to protect children, using it as a tool of harassment against a grieving teenager. But I'd learned something important about fighting bullies over the past few months. Document everything, stay calm, and let them destroy themselves with their own actions. I immediately called the school to inform them about the situation, ensuring that any potential contact from Patty would be properly documented. I also reached out to our family physician to establish a clear record of Sophia's physical and emotional well-being, creating professional testimony about her healthy adjustment after her mother's death. Most importantly, I installed additional security cameras around our house perimeter, ensuring that any future harassment attempts would be captured on video. Patty's next escalation came through social media and neighborhood gossip networks. She started a whisper campaign suggesting that there was something suspicious about a single father who'd moved into the neighborhood so quickly after his wife's death, implying that my grief timeline somehow indicated guilty behavior. The manipulation was sophisticated and evil. She couldn't attack me directly without revealing her own criminal activities, so she created doubt through innuendo and timing coincidences. Why had we moved so quickly? Why was I often working late? Why did Sophia seem so mature and independent for her age? Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned overhearing these conversations during her weekly grocery shopping, where Patty had apparently been spreading concerns about our family situation to anyone who would listen. But Patty had made a critical miscalculation. Our neighbors had lived through their own family tragedies, job losses, divorces, and medical crises. Most of them recognized grief when they saw it, and they'd watched Sophia and me supporting each other through genuine loss with dignity and love. The whisper campaign backfired spectacularly. Instead of creating suspicion about our family, it generated sympathy and protective anger toward Patty's increasingly obvious harassment tactics. Jim Rodriguez stopped by that weekend to check on us, mentioning that several neighbors were discussing Patty's behavior and finding it way over the line. Mrs. Mila brought Sophia homemade cookies and told me privately that some people don't understand that healing takes time and looks different for every family. During this escalation phase, I noticed something else troubling in the security footage. Patty was having increasingly animated phone conversations outside the clubhouse, pacing back and forth with obvious agitation. Sometimes these calls lasted over an hour, with lots of gesturing and what appeared to be arguing. She was also receiving more frequent delivery trucks, but now they included what looked like legal documents and certified mail that she signed for with visible stress. The final mini twist of this escalation loop became clear when I researched court records more thoroughly. Patty's ex-husband had filed contempt of court charges for her failure to vacate the clubhouse as required by their divorce settlement. Her illegal residency wasn't just an HOA problem, it was also a violation of court orders that could result in jail time. She was fighting battles on multiple fronts: divorce court, potential criminal charges for embezzlement, housing violations, and now the growing awareness among neighbors that her authority was completely fabricated. But instead of retreating or seeking help, Patty doubled down on her attacks against my family, apparently believing that destroying our credibility would somehow solve her mounting legal problems. As I watched her self-destruct in real time through security footage, I felt a mixture of anticipation and genuine sadness. In less than a week, her carefully constructed facade of authority and control would collapse completely in front of everyone she'd tried to intimidate. But for now, all I could do was protect Sophia, document everything, and wait for the meeting where justice would finally be served. In the final week before the HOA meeting, Patty's desperation reached levels that crossed from harassment into genuinely dangerous territory. She wasn't just trying to discredit me anymore, she was attempting to sabotage the entire community meeting where her crimes would be exposed. It started when I discovered she'd been calling other board members, spreading elaborate lies about my supposed mental instability, and claiming I was planning to disrupt the meeting with unfounded accusations. She told Bob Mila that I'd been stalking her and making threatening statements about taking over the HOA. The beauty of her lies was that they contained just enough truth to sound plausible. Yes, I had been watching her activities closely through legal security cameras on community property. Yes, I was planning to present serious accusations at the meeting, backed by documented evidence of her actual crimes. But Patty's version painted me as an unhinged, grieving widower who'd become obsessed with her because she'd tried to maintain reasonable community standards. It was a masterful manipulation that played on stereotypes about men who lose their wives and supposedly can't handle being told what to do by strong women. Fortunately, Bob Mila was smart enough to ask for specifics. When Patty couldn't provide actual examples of threatening behavior or concrete evidence of stalking, her story started falling apart under scrutiny. But her most dangerous escalation came when she started recruiting allies through a combination of lies and bribes. She reached out to newer residents who didn't know the neighborhood dynamics, presenting herself as a dedicated volunteer being harassed by a troublesome neighbor. Mrs. Patterson, who'd moved in just 3 months ago, suddenly started posting on the neighborhood Facebook page about respecting longtime community volunteers and not letting newcomers disrupt established procedures. She'd clearly been fed Patty's version of events without hearing the full story. Even more concerning, Patty had apparently offered to waive several questionable violation notices for residents who agreed to speak against me at the meeting. David Kim mentioned that she'd approached him suggesting his satellite dish violation could disappear if he was willing to testify about my aggressive behavior during our previous conversations. The quid pro quo was obvious. Support her at the meeting and your fake violations would vanish. Oppose her and face escalating harassment through manufactured citations. But Patty's final desperate move revealed just how far she was willing to go to protect her secret. 3 days before the meeting, she filed a formal complaint with the county sheriff's office claiming I'd been trespassing on HOA property and vandalizing community equipment. Her story was that I'd installed unauthorized surveillance devices to spy on residents and had been damaging clubhouse property during nighttime visits. She presented herself as a concerned HOA official, trying to protect the community from an unstable individual. The irony was breathtaking. She was accusing me of crimes she'd been committing while using her illegal residency and embezzlement as the basis for her supposed authority to file complaints. But this move backfired catastrophically. When Deputy Williams came to investigate her complaint, I was able to present him with my carefully organized evidence file. The security cameras were legal installations on community property with proper HOA board approval. The vandalism she'd reported was actually her own spray paint attack on my cameras, which I had video evidence of her committing. Most damaging for Patty, her complaint required her to identify herself as an HOA official with authority to report violations. When Deputy Williams asked for documentation of her position and authority, she couldn't provide legitimate credentials because she'd been operating outside any real authorization. The deputy left with more questions about Patty's claims than about my activities, and I had a feeling her complaint would soon become evidence against her instead of protection from accountability. During this final escalation, I noticed her behavior becoming increasingly erratic in the security footage. She was pacing the clubhouse at all hours, having heated phone conversations, and showing signs of severe stress that suggested she knew her time was running out. Sophia had started asking thoughtful questions about what would happen to the mean lady when everything came out. "Dad, do you think she'll go to jail?" "I don't know, kiddo, but I do know that actions have consequences, and adults who hurt other people need to face those consequences." The weekend before the meeting, Patty made her final desperate play. She created an official-looking notice and posted it throughout the neighborhood. HOA meeting postponed, board president unavailable, rescheduled date TBD. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. Bob Mila had my phone number, and he immediately called to ask why the meeting was being postponed when he'd never authorized any schedule change. When I told him about the fake notices, Bob's anger was palpable. "That's it. She's crossed way too many lines. Monday night's meeting is happening as scheduled, and I'm personally ensuring every resident knows about it." Sunday evening, as I made final preparations for the presentation that would end Patty's reign of terror, I felt that familiar pre-project calm. Everything was documented, evidence was organized, witnesses were prepared, and the venue was secured. Patty had spent months trying to control, intimidate, and destroy my family through lies and manufactured authority. Tomorrow night, in front of the entire community she'd been stealing from, she would finally face the consequences of her choices. The trap was perfect, and she was walking directly into it. Monday evening arrived with the crisp clarity of autumn air and the kind of nervous energy that precedes life-changing moments. By 6:45 p.m., the clubhouse was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through the neighborhood network, and nearly 50 residents crowded into a space designed for 30. Bob Mila had done his job perfectly. Not only was Officer Martinez present as the community liaison, but Bob had also quietly invited a reporter from the local newspaper who covered municipal government issues, suggesting this might be an interesting story about community governance and financial transparency. Patty sat in the front row, looking confident and composed, clearly believing she still controlled the narrative. She'd dressed professionally, carried her ubiquitous clipboard, and positioned herself like she expected to co-chair the meeting. She had no idea she was sitting in the center of her own execution chamber. "Before we address tonight's special agenda item," Bob announced, "I want to acknowledge that we have some concerns about recent community management issues that need immediate attention." I stood up with my presentation materials, feeling that familiar construction site focus where everything else disappears except the task at hand. "Thank you, Bob. I've prepared a comprehensive financial review that I believe will interest everyone here." The first slide showed our HOA's budget overview, looking completely routine and boring. Several residents shifted in their seats, probably wondering why they'd bothered attending what seemed like standard administrative business. Over the past 6 months, our maintenance and administrative costs have increased significantly, I continued, clicking to the next slide showing expenditure trends. I thought the community deserved transparency about where our dues are actually going. Patty was nodding along, probably thinking this was exactly the kind of responsible financial oversight she'd been advocating for. She had no idea the noose was already tightening. The next slide showed specific line items: landscaping supplies, facility maintenance, administrative costs. Still routine looking, but I could see Bob Mila starting to frown as he recognized discrepancies in amounts he hadn't authorized. These expenses caught my attention because they don't match any vendor receipts or approved expenditures in our official records, I said, clicking to reveal the discrepancies highlighted in red. Now people were paying attention. Mrs. Rodriguez was taking notes. Jim Kim was leaning forward with obvious concern. So I decided to investigate further, I continued, clicking to the security camera footage. I installed legal surveillance equipment in our common areas to monitor clubhouse usage and security. The first video clip showed Patty entering the clubhouse with grocery bags at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday, looking like she was coming home from shopping rather than conducting official business. A murmur rippled through the room. Patty's confident expression flickered for the first time. This footage covers the past 3 weeks, I said, advancing to clips of her daily routines. Leaving in the morning with a travel mug, returning in the evening with dinner, lights staying on until midnight. It appears someone has been using our community facility as a private residence. The murmur became audible gasps. Patty was gripping her clipboard so hard her knuckles were white. But the financial investigation revealed something even more concerning, I continued, advancing to bank transaction records. Small amounts have been systematically transferred from our community accounts to cover personal expenses. The detailed breakdown showed grocery purchases, utility payments, even gasoline charges disguised as maintenance costs. $4,000 over 6 months, all traceable to Patty's personal needs. "She's been stealing from all of us," someone called out from the back. Officer Martinez was now taking notes and looking very interested in the proceedings, but I wasn't finished. Additionally, some residents have received violation notices that don't exist in any official HOA documentation. I called on Mrs. Mila, Jim Rodriguez, and David Kim, who stood up to confirm they'd paid fines for violations that had no basis in actual community rules. $800 in fraudulent fines, I announced, collected by someone with no authority to issue citations. The room erupted in angry voices. People were standing up, demanding explanations, turning to stare at Patty with expressions of betrayal and fury. That's when Bob Mila delivered the final blow. "Patricia Whitmore, you are hereby removed from any HOA position, effective immediately. Officer Martinez, I believe we have documented evidence of embezzlement and fraud that requires official investigation." Patty finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate shriek. "You don't understand. I had nowhere else to go. The divorce, the foreclosure. I was trying to keep everything together." It was the confession we needed, delivered in front of 50 witnesses and a police officer. "Ma'am," Officer Martinez said, standing up with professional authority, "I need you to step outside with me. We're going to have a conversation about these financial irregularities and housing violations." As Patty was escorted out, the room buzzed with angry energy and shocked conversations. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been recruited to support Patty, stood up with obvious embarrassment. "I owe some people apologies. I was completely misled about what was happening here." Bob Mila regained control of the meeting. "We'll be working with law enforcement and our legal counsel to recover stolen funds and ensure this never happens again. Mr. Thompson, on behalf of the community, thank you for bringing this to light." The applause was spontaneous and sustained. But more importantly, I could see relief on faces throughout the room. Relief that the harassment and fake violations were finally over, that their community was safe again. Walking home under streetlights, with neighbors stopping to shake my hand and thank me, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah's death, the satisfaction of justice properly served and community restored. Sophia was waiting on our front porch. "Dad, how did it go?" "Justice was served, kiddo. The neighborhood is safe again." 6 months later, our neighborhood had transformed into something Sarah would have recognized, a genuine community where people looked out for each other instead of living in fear of manufactured violations and petty harassment. Patty pled guilty to embezzlement and trespassing charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 18 months probation, community service, and full restitution to the HOA. Her ex-husband's contempt charges were dropped once she finally vacated the clubhouse and found legitimate housing. She moved across town, and we haven't seen her since the sentencing hearing. The stolen money was fully recovered and returned to our community accounts. But Bob Mila proposed something better than just restocking our maintenance fund. At a packed community meeting in March, we voted unanimously to establish the Sarah Thompson Music Education Scholarship, providing piano lessons and instruments for neighborhood children whose families couldn't otherwise afford them. "Your wife would have loved this," Mrs. Mila told me during the scholarship announcement ceremony. Music bringing kids together instead of being used to tear families apart. Sophia was the scholarship program's first volunteer instructor, teaching basic piano to 3 younger kids whose parents worked multiple jobs. Watching her share her gift with others, seeing her confidence bloom as she helped other children discover the healing power of music, gave me a glimpse of the woman she was becoming, someone who'd transform her own pain into service for others. Our evening piano sessions had evolved into something magical. Instead of practicing alone, Sophia now hosted weekly community music nights where neighbors gathered in our living room for informal concerts, sing-alongs, and musical storytelling. The sound of children's laughter mixed with piano melodies filled our house every Wednesday evening, creating the kind of warm domestic chaos that heals broken hearts. Mrs. Rodriguez became the HOA's new secretary, bringing actual administrative experience and a commitment to transparent governance. She instituted monthly financial reports, open book policies, and a formal appeals process for any legitimate violations. Jim Kim was elected as community liaison, ensuring that new residents received proper orientation about actual rules rather than manufactured harassment. The clubhouse was renovated with recovered funds, transformed from Patty's secret residence back into a proper community gathering space. We installed a community piano, donated by several families, and established regular social events that brought neighbors together for positive reasons instead of emergency meetings about manufactured crises. But the most meaningful change was harder to quantify. Children played outside without parents worrying about violation notices. Teenagers could practice music without fear of noise complaints. Families could park their cars, decorate for holidays, and live their daily lives without someone constantly monitoring and measuring their activities for infractions. The surveillance cameras I'd installed remained active, but now they served their intended purpose: actual security rather than evidence gathering for neighborhood harassment campaigns. Crime dropped significantly when potential troublemakers realized our community was watching out for each other rather than trying to control each other. Bob Mila implemented quarterly community meetings where residents could address concerns, propose improvements, and participate in decision-making about their neighborhood's future. These gatherings became celebrations rather than interrogations, with potluck dinners, children's activities, and genuine problem-solving discussions. During one of these meetings, David Kim stood up to address the group. 6 months ago, we were all afraid to park wrong or play music or enjoy our own homes. Now my kids ask if we can move because they love this neighborhood so much. That's what real community leadership looks like. The scholarship program expanded beyond our neighborhood. Other HOAs heard about our approach and requested guidance on establishing similar music education initiatives. Sophia started a blog documenting the healing power of community music programs, which caught attention from educational organizations across the state. Local news coverage of Patty's conviction and our community's recovery became a model for other neighborhoods dealing with HOA harassment and financial corruption. Officer Martinez, who'd witnessed the dramatic meeting that exposed Patty's crimes, often referenced our case during community policing workshops about recognizing and addressing neighborhood disputes before they escalate to criminal behavior. But the most important healing happened gradually, in daily moments that rebuilt trust and safety. Neighbors began stopping for conversations instead of hurrying past each other. Children formed friendships that crossed property lines. Adults organized block parties, holiday celebrations, and informal support networks for families dealing with illness, job loss, or other life challenges. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from Patty, the first communication since her sentencing. She apologized for the pain she'd caused our family, acknowledged that her actions stemmed from her own desperation and fear, and expressed genuine remorse for targeting Sophia's recovery process. She'd completed anger management counseling and financial responsibility classes as part of her probation requirements. I showed the letter to Sophia, who read it thoughtfully before responding. "Dad, I'm glad she's getting help, but I'm also glad we stood up for ourselves and protected other families." That evening, as Sophia's music floated through our house during her practice session, Debussy's Clair de Lune, the same piece Patty had tried to silence, I felt Sarah's presence in the melody. Our daughter had learned something invaluable about standing up to bullies, protecting community, and transforming pain into service for others. The scholarship fund had grown to support 12 children, 3 community pianos, and a summer music camp that brought families together across economic and cultural differences. What started as one woman's attempt to destroy our healing had become a catalyst for community-wide transformation. But our story isn't unique. Every neighborhood has its Patties, people who use manufactured authority to control others, who hide their own problems behind harassment of innocent families, who mistake fear for respect and compliance for community. If you're dealing with HOA harassment, document everything, know your actual rights versus imaginary rules, and remember that bullies with clipboards are still just bullies. And if you've survived something like what we went through, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Most importantly, don't let anyone steal your family's joy, silence your children's music, or make you afraid to come home to your own house. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone, and real communities are built on support rather than surveillance. Thanks for watching. And please subscribe for more stories about ordinary people fighting back against extraordinary injustice, because everyone deserves to feel safe in their own neighborhood.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.